I had to check. It's been about 3 months or so since I've posted. The very, very last video I posted was actually kind of a political rant, and then several people chimed in and said, really, dude, do not do this. I gotta say, I think they're right. There's literally nothing I could say that hasn't been said a million times. Also, anything I say, no matter what, is gonna be taken out of context by whichever side I'm dumping on. I've dumped on both sides many times to my friends and family. I've posted like 350 videos, give or take, over the last 8 years, and have never mentioned politics at all until the last video. But then after I posted it, I didn't feel good about it. I was just like, man, this is just a bunch of noise. This is the last thing people need. This is supposed to be my sacred place, my creative place. I actually delete a lot of my videos, mainly because a lot of these videos aren't really meant to be permanent. Sometimes I'm just asking the viewers questions, getting their opinions on a box art design or a game mechanic. And once I resolve the thing that I'm trying to solve, the video is no longer relevant. And so I just delete it. It's actually easier to delete videos that are no longer relevant than to leave them up, and then people stumble onto the channel, they watch a video that's no longer relevant, they give me a bunch of feedback on it. It's a waste of their time. So yeah, I've taken a lot of time off of low. There were problems with the game. I couldn't quite figure out how to fix them. I shelved it for a bit. I did a bunch of other things. To this point, the game has always used a 1d6 dice mechanic. It's never been a huge hit with players. People like to roll dice, and rolling 1d6 is very underwhelming. And I've had countless conversations with viewers of the channel and with playtesters about the dice mechanic. My biggest problem with the dice mechanic is it's just like the amount of cognitive load that occurs. The arithmetic involved is very simple. You're just rolling 1d6, you're adding a value to it, but then you're also adding modifiers. And then you have to remember what your final result was. You have to store that away in your brain while you're doing other calculations for the monster. And I can't tell you how many times during playtests where I was like, whoa, wait, what was our combat roll result? Not a huge deal, but when you're doing that dozens and dozens of times, it kind of gets exhausting. So then, it's like, well, you could have a scorecard and you could just sort of write down your combat roll results, or you could have some sort of chart where you're plotting the results each time with little markers. How most modern dungeon crawlers have solved this problem is they've moved to dice pools. I've always been very resistant to dice pools, and I've always been very resistant to custom dice, which is why I hung on to the 1d6 mechanic for so long. But I decided to take the plunge and really try to dive into dice pools and see if I could come up with a dice pool system that's not too cumbersome and that mechanically does everything that the old system did. Mechanically, the old system did exactly what I wanted it to. It kind of modeled the range, the 2-hit range that I wanted for both the hero and the monsters. And it kind of modeled like the level of granularity that I wanted within the system. So mechanically, it was fine. It's just like the user experience was not great. So in the old system, that gap would have to have a challenge rating, first of all. So this gap has a challenge rating of 8. You had to know the ability score, and then you had to roll 1d6. You had to add them together and then compare. So in the new system, his agility would be 3, and you basically just roll 3 dice because he has agility 3, and he needs 1 success to jump the gap, and he got 2 successes, so he easily jumps the gap. Now, right now, I'm playing around with these dice that have 3 misses or 3 fails and 3 successes. And one of those 3 successes is a crit, which is contextual. So every weapon, every piece of armor, every monster has some sort of contextual rules for crits. With jump gapping, there's no contextual rules, although there's going to be just normal gaps where you need 1 success, but then there's going to be like large gaps or difficult gaps, which would require 2 successes. So heroes will roll and monsters will roll. So there'll be a set of monster dice. Let's say you're fighting 4 rage rats, and the rage rat card says you roll 1 die for each rage rat. So here we randomly rolled 4 successes. Combat would happen simultaneously. So all 4 rage rats would do 1 point of damage to the hero while simultaneously the hero's killing one of the rage rats. You know, the armor might say, you know, turn any success into a block. So maybe this armor would absorb or block one of these damages, and then you end up with 3 damage. And, you know, maybe a crit with a shield could be like, you know, block 2 damage or block all damage. So here there's no cognitive load, and that's why a lot of game systems have turned to dice pools. It's all sort of computed and laid out before you when you roll the dice. I want to keep my dice pools really small. One thing I don't like about dice pools is when they get huge. So there's going to be kind of like a max 4 dice for the monsters and for the heroes. And I thought about maybe adding like some special dice, like this die has 2 crits and 4 misses. Certain pieces of equipment allow you to add one of these special dies in. So I wanted my system to be very easy to create at home. And how I started before I bought these blank dice and drew pictures on them was I just started with normal D6 dice, and I just took a black Sharpie and I blotted out the 6, the 4, and the 5 faces, so those become blanks. And then the 1 and the 3 face just become a single success. And then the 2 face is the crit. So if you wanted to make these custom dice at home, that's all you would need to do. You just buy some black dice with white pips, get some Sharpies. Now I have spent time with the math, and the math on my dice pool system is not identical to the math of my old 1d6 system, but it's similar. Like it accomplishes a lot of the similar sort of outcomes that I want to go for. I think one of the main differences is right now, the worst outcome you can have is like a 50% on a basic ability. So like, let's say you want to jump a gap and you have an agility of 1. With the old system, you could end up with like a 1/6 chance clearing the gap if you have a low agility. And now like the worst that can happen basically is a 50% chance. This actually does not bother me. There are certain circumstances with combat where your odds of success can get a lot less depending on the number of dice versus the number of dice, and you know what the crit instructions are for the monster. I feel like the worst that should be presented to you is a coin toss on clearing that gap. So in some ways I like the outcome probabilities of the dice pool system better. Also, you can do the 1 success outcome, but then on harder things you can be like, well, you need 2 successes. And if you're only rolling 1 die and you need 2 successes, then that's a situation where you just can't do that thing. So that's where I'm at with low right now. Feel free to let me know what you think about the dice pool mechanics. I feel like mechanically it's very similar to the old system, but from a user experience perspective, I think it solves a lot of issues. This whole game design project has really kind of been an exercise in going through the evolution of dungeon crawl game mechanics. And I didn't do that on purpose. I really just started with this notion that like maybe modern game design sort of went down the wrong path. And what if I just rewind back to the beginning of dungeon crawls and forged my own path? And where I've ended up is kind of very similar to how modern dungeon crawl games are designed. But I've also managed to keep a lot of the little things that I think makes my game different and makes me want to play my game.